Have you had those moments where you hear a song you need to hear, someone says something you were just wondering about, and at the same time you're feeling disconnected with life? Well, those meaningful coincidences can be used to change that, and we'll talk about how. This podcast is about simple changes to create more calm and peace in your life. You don't have to feel overwhelmed and overhaul your whole life all at once. I'm a certified life and mindset coach, but my thoughts are from my own experiences and things I've learned along the way. So stop dreaming of your better life, make small changes, and begin to live it. If you've ever had one of those moments where you felt like life was quietly nudging you, like the universe or whatever else you believe in was giving you a sign, this episode is for you. And if you feel like your life has been on autopilot lately, like you're doing all the right things but still feeling a little disconnected or unsure of direction because you honestly haven't seen any kind of sign, well, this episode is also for you because we're talking about the wonder and power of synchronicity. Instead of thinking things are just coincidence and you begin to look for and acknowledge the synchronicity of your life with the world, you begin to listen to your own intuition again. You begin to remember that life is not happening to you, but it's happening for you. Synchronicity also helps with direction, especially when life feels confusing or overwhelming. Instead of trying to map out everything at once, it encourages you to focus on the next small step, which is what we're all about here. Let's start by talking about what synchronicity actually is. The term was introduced by Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and psychologist, who described it as a meaningful coincidences that occur without a clear cause, but feel deeply significant to the person experiencing them. So not something random, not something forced, but just something that's meaningful in a way that makes you pause. He quoted, "Synchronicity is an ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see it." Now, this suggests that synchronicity isn't rare or reserved for special people. It's happening all the time, all around us, to everyone. And the difference is whether we're paying attention. Now, I know whenever we talk about things like this, some people immediately think this sounds a little too woo-woo or mystical or like it belongs in a crystal shop next to a stack of incense. And listen, I love a good candle as much as the next person, but I also love grounding these ideas in real life. Because synchronicity isn't about magical thinking or waiting around for the universe to do all the work. It's just about awareness. It's about noticing patterns. It's about being present enough to recognize when something aligns. And I personally find this happening to me on a regular basis. So I'll share some examples and why I think it happens. And that will be the non-sciencey part of this podcast. But think about your own life for a moment. Have you ever been thinking about someone you haven't talked to in years and then they suddenly reach out? Or you're wrestling with a decision and you overhear a conversation or read something that makes it all clear, like it was just there waiting for you. What's interesting is that science doesn't dismiss these experiences as quickly as we might think. There's research around attention, perception, and meaning making that helps explain why synchronicity can feel so powerful and useful. One study published in Psychological Science looked at how people who are more mindful and attentive to their internal and external experiences are better at recognizing meaningful patterns in their environment. In other words, when we slow down and become more aware, we notice important connections we might otherwise miss. Research also consistently shows that people who experience their lives as meaningful tend to have better mental and emotional well-being. Even difficult moments can feel less overwhelming when you can place them within a larger context of growth, learning, or redirection. Now, this doesn't mean everything happens for a reason, but it does mean that you can find reasons to keep going, learning, and trusting yourself. Another area of research that supports this idea comes from studies on intuition and decision-making. Research published in the journal Frontiers in Psychology suggests that intuition is not some mystical force, but rather a rapid integration of past experiences, emotional signals, and subtle cues that our conscious mind hasn't fully processed yet. When something feels like a sign or a nudge, it's often our brain connecting dots faster than we realize, that are so fast they're hitting the subconscious level, but if we pay attention, we can bring it to the forefront of our minds. And this is where synchronicity becomes incredibly practical. It's not about believing everything is a sign or reading meaning into every text message or cloud formation. It's about learning to listen to yourself and your environment in a more intentional way. So how do we actually do that? How do we start seeing synchronicity in our lives instead of blowing past it on our way to the next task or the next obligation? The first step is slowing down just enough to notice, and I know easier said than done. We live in a world that rushes everything, especially here in the Western world. We rush from one thing to the next, often multitasking so hard that we're technically present, but mentally somewhere else. And this is where self care comes in, not in the bubble bath sense, but in the nervous system sense. When we're constantly stressed, overwhelmed, running on fumes, our capacity to notice subtle cues shrinks because we're just surviving. We're checking things off the list. But when we create even small pockets of calm, our awareness expands. Synchronicity works best when you're curious, but not desperate. It's not searching, it's just about noticing what shows up and asking yourself, does this resonate? Does this feel supportive? Does this align in what I already know deep down? Now, if you're asking the universe for a sign and you're stressed and frantic and refreshing your email every 30 seconds, that's probably not synchronicity. Asking if I should take this job because I saw 3 birds this morning is not synchronicity. Instead, try this. When something catches your attention in a meaningful way, pause and ask yourself a simple question. What might I consider? Not what should I do, or not what does this mean forever? Just what is this pointing me toward right now? Synchronicity helps you participate more fully in your life. Instead of living on autopilot, you become an active observer and responder. You notice what resonates, what feels aligned, and you adjust when something no longer fits. And this creates a life that feels more intentional, more authentic, and more peaceful. Now, let me give you some personal examples. A few months before I started this podcast, I was thinking about it, but really hadn't said anything to anyone. I hadn't yet made it concrete. I traveled to Texas for a work conference, and as I was heading back to the airport in an Uber, the driver and I got to talking about our thoughts on life in general, and he said something to the effect that I really should be sharing my thoughts and that he thought I would make a wonderful speaker or I should have a radio show. And I mentioned, well, I was thinking of a podcast, and he said, yes, that's it. That's what you need to do. Then when I got back home, I started working on ideas, and I came up with the title, Little by Little, Piece by Piece. And that week, I swear, before I put it into place, I was parking my car near downtown. I got out of my car and realized the car parked in front of me, which was the exact model of my car, and at the time it was not a common car that I had, and the license plate was Peace. And as I've shared a few times in other episodes, I sometimes think of episode ideas, and then throughout the week, someone will ask me about a similar topic or will say something that was the exact thing I wrote as an idea. And I find myself regularly saying, thank you, universe, I hear you. And that's how synchronicity can help you move in the right direction in your life, especially if you're feeling stuck or uncertain. One of the biggest benefits is that it helps you trust yourself again. When you start noticing meaningful patterns, you realize that clarity doesn't always come from forcing decisions or overthinking every possibility. Sometimes it comes from paying attention to what feels aligned. Think about a time when you ignored a nudge or a feeling and later thought, I knew better. Synchronicity often works the same way. It's not about predicting the future, it's about aligning with the present. It could be something in your life right now that you keep circling back to, a thought, or something that keeps showing up in different ways but keeps repeating in your life, and maybe that repetition might be worth listening to. From a self-care perspective, practicing awareness of synchronicity can be grounding. It shifts you out of a constant striving and into a more responsive way of living. Instead of pushing yourself forward at all costs, you begin to collaborate with your life. You still take action, but from presence, not pressure. Now let's talk about how to apply this in very real, everyday ways. You don't need to change your life or adopt a new system, no new religion. You just need to practice noticing. And one simple practice is maybe keeping a small awareness journal, not a full diary, just a place where you jot down moments that felt meaningful or oddly timed, a conversation that stood out, an idea that came out of nowhere, an opportunity that surprised you. Over time, patterns will likely emerge. Another practice is creating space for quiet. This could be a walk without headphones, a few minutes of breathing before bed, sitting in your car for an extra moment before going inside. These small pauses are where awareness grows. I mean, when was the last time you gave yourself space to just be quiet, to notice without trying to fix or improve anything? And it's also important to talk about why synchronicity matters. It can help you feel less alone in your life, not in a cosmic way necessarily, but in a grounded human way. It reminds you that your experiences are connected and that maybe there is some powerful force that can help guide you, whether you're religious or not. Synchronicity can support this sense of meaning by helping you see your experiences are connected rather than random. Now, not everything has to lead to a big life change. Sometimes it's just a connection for whatever reason. And I want to share an example of this type of connection, and this one really blew my mind. In our main downtown street, there are people in need who walk around, and there was this one woman who was really not very well, but she was very well known, and she would walk by and ask for food. A few times I walked with her to the ice cream store a few doors down, invited her in, and told the staff to give her whatever she wanted, and usually was a large sundae, and we would chat. People called her horrible names, but she said her name was Gabby. We wouldn't spend much time, but we just spent time being human together. Then one day, I had a lunch meeting with a client, and she mentioned about how she didn't like being downtown because of so many homeless. And we got to talking about how they're still human and should be treated as such. And I shared how I would buy ice cream for this woman and how I hadn't seen her in a while. She then shared her sister was one of the most famous homeless downtown, and her name was Gabriella. And it clicked. Her sister was Gabby. She shared that I hadn't seen her as she passed away last year, but she was so happy that someone was kind to her before she passed. And I was so happy that I could have done that for her. Now, how beautiful is that? And what a wonder that we two random people had this connection. Synchronicity brings that sense of wonder and connection back into our everyday lives. Now, you can say, well, isn't this just coincidence? Aren't we just assigning meaning to random events? And yes, coincidence and synchronicity can look very similar. Something happens, you notice the connection, and then you make something of it. But the difference isn't actually about what happens. It's about how it happens and how it lands inside of us. A coincidence is usually random, but neutral, and might be surprising or amusing, but it doesn't necessarily change anything. You think of someone and they text. You notice it and then move on. There's no deeper impact. Synchronicity, on the other hand, carries meaning because it connects to something inside you, something that triggers a feeling within, and it lingers and nudges. It doesn't just say, well, that was odd. It says, pay attention. Something bigger is going on here. Here's another way to think about it. Coincidence happens around you. Synchronicity happens within you. It makes you pause and feel. It feels personal and timed in a way that speaks directly to what you've been thinking about, struggling with, or hoping for. You don't have to explain it. You don't have to convince anyone else it means something. The meaning is internal to you, and it's measured by whether it brings clarity, encouragement, or alignment, not whether it can be proven. From a psychological perspective, this makes sense. Our brains are meaning-making machines. We're constantly filtering information, looking for relevance, and connecting experiences to our inner narratives. The difference between coincidence and synchronicity is that synchronicity aligns with your values, your questions, or your current life direction in a way that feels supportive rather than distracting. And that's where self-care comes in again. When we're disconnected from ourselves, exhausted, overwhelmed, everything feels like noise. Everything can blur together and you lose any importance. But when we're regulated, present, and grounded, we can tell the difference between noise and signal. Another key distinction is that synchronicity asks nothing of you. It doesn't force action, but it opens a door to make a choice, take a step, have a conversation, or trust yourself a little more. What you do with that door and whether you realize it's even opening is completely up to you. Now, let's be clear. Synchronicity is not about sitting back and waiting for life to happen. It's about showing up fully and noticing what responds. And as we start to wrap this up, let's talk about making some small changes. Nothing dramatic, but small shifts so you can begin to notice the synchronicity around you and giving yourself the time and space to be open to it, recognize it, and determine its meaning. Today or this week, choose one moment a day to slow down and notice. That's it. Notice what catches your attention. Notice what repeats. Notice what feels meaningful. You don't have to interpret it, just notice. If something stands out, ask yourself, how does this make me feel? Your emotional response is often more important than the event itself. And if nothing stands out, that's okay too. This is a practice, not a performance. Remember, you don't want to force anything. Just remain open and receptive. And before we close today, if this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to share it with someone and not just say, hey, listen to this, but say, this made me think of you because of X. That one sentence can open beautiful conversations, and maybe it will connect with them in a way that they've been waiting to connect and create synchronicity for them. I'd also love to hear your synchronicity stories. You can message me, email, comment wherever you're listening, and tell me about a moment that made you pause. Those stories remind us all to pay attention and create more connections. And if you're not already following the podcast, this is your gentle nudge to do that. Not because you should, but because this space is about small moments of awareness that add up over time. Following helps you build that rhythm of reflection into your life, helps you be more open. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank yourself for being willing to notice your life a little more closely. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to be present enough to see what's already unfolding and see those moments of connection, where the universe or whatever you believe in is shining a light and guiding you, little by little and piece by piece. This podcast is based on my own life experiences. I'm not a therapist, a psychologist, psychiatrist, or any other licensed medical professional. Please share this podcast with anyone you think needs to hear this so that we all move forward, little by little and piece by piece. And thank you, Purple Planet, for sharing your music. And please hit the follow or subscribe button. It really does help.